In any interconnected system, the pathways that carry resources and create prosperity are also vectors for contagion. In the 21st century, global air travel gave us a terrifying lesson in how fast a pathogen can exploit such a network. Nearly 2 millennia ago, the Roman Empire learned that same lesson, carved in stone and blood. Its sprawling grid of roads and sea lanes was a logistical masterpiece, the very architecture of its power. This network bound 3 continents, moving legions, goods, and governors with a speed the world had never seen. This system was the empire's greatest asset. But when a new disease entered that system, this asset became a fatal liability. A network perfected for projecting power became a network perfected for transmitting pestilence. The system that built the empire became the mechanism that brought it to its knees. This is an autopsy of that failure. Before we continue, this channel covers what history did to human bodies and systems, not myths. Comment where you're watching from. If this is worth your time, like and subscribe. To understand how the system collapsed, we first need to see it at its peak in the mid-2nd century AD. This was the era of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. While often linked with Marcus Aurelius, the zenith of this stability is more accurately credited to his predecessor, Antoninus Pius, whose reign was remarkably free of major wars. When Pius died in March 161 AD, he passed this vast interconnected apparatus to his co-emperors, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. At this moment, the empire was less a collection of territories and more a single integrated network of an estimated 75 million people. This integration was powered by revolutionary infrastructure. The core of the system was over 250,000 miles of roads, with more than 50,000 of those miles being stone-paved highways. These weren't ceremonial avenues, they were the empire's circulatory system, engineered for durability and speed. They enabled the constant rotation and supply of a military that numbered as many as 450,000 soldiers at its peak, including both legions and auxiliaries. A soldier could be reassigned from the Rhine frontier in Germany to Mesopotamia, marching on durable roads with logistical support at regular intervals. This mobility was the bedrock of Roman military supremacy. This same network was the engine of the economy. Raw materials flowed in, tin from Britain, grain from Egypt, marble from Greece. Finished goods flowed out. At the center of it all was Rome, a metropolis of 1 million inhabitants. Its port, Ostia, was a whirlwind of logistics, processing hundreds of ships daily to feed and supply the capital. Urban life, especially in the multi-story apartment blocks called insulae, was defined by extreme density and poor sanitation. This hyperconnectivity was the source of Roman power, facilitating military control, economic wealth, and administrative rule. In 161 AD, the Roman system was a portrait of order and strength, but its very design, high-speed travel, dense urban centers, and the constant movement of people made it uniquely vulnerable to a biological threat. The system was about to be turned against itself. The catalyst was war. In 161 AD, the Parthian Empire invaded the Roman client state of Armenia, forcing co-emperor Lucius Verus to lead a massive army east. After a 5-year campaign, the Roman legions were victorious, sacking the Parthian capital of Seleucia on the Tigris in 166 AD. But amidst the plundered treasures, the army brought something else back. Ancient sources report the pestilence first appearing among Roman troops during the siege of Seleucia in the winter of 165 to 166 AD. The agent, widely believed to be a virulent strain of smallpox, was likely already active in the east. Records from Han China mention a similar epidemic, suggesting the pathogen may have traveled west along the Silk Road. The returning Roman army was the vector. As the victorious soldiers began their long march home, They carried the disease along the empire's own logistical pathways. Every stop at a garrison, town, or port was a new infection event. The pathogen moved with the brutal efficiency of the Roman military itself, spreading through the forts, supply depots, and merchant ships that sustained the legions. By 166 AD, the plague had reached Rome. A grand triumph was held to celebrate the victory, with thousands of soldiers parading through streets packed with cheering crowds. This celebration is now understood to have been a colossal superspreader event. From the capital, the disease radiated outward. The same sea lanes that brought Egyptian grain now carried the pathogen. The same roads that moved legions now transmitted the contagion to the farthest provinces. By 172 AD, the plague had been reported from Egypt to Gaul and along the Rhine and Danube frontiers. The core strengths of the imperial system became the accelerators of its breakdown. The army's rapid mobility ensured the disease reached the most remote corners of the empire. The high volume of trade on the roads and sea lanes acted as a conveyor belt for the pathogen, and the density of the cities turned them into ideal incubators for exponential spread. Lacking any concept of germ theory, many Romans attributed the outbreak to divine anger for the sack of Seleucia. The enemy, however, wasn't an invading army. It was a silent passenger being efficiently distributed by the empire's own infrastructure. The system designed for control was now orchestrating a catastrophe. The physician Galen, who was in Rome during the outbreak, left clinical descriptions of the disease's horrific effects. It began with an intense fever, vomiting, and a swollen throat. A key symptom was black diarrhea, a sign of severe gastrointestinal bleeding. Around the 9th day, a rash of black pustules would erupt, covering the body inside and out. In fatal cases, patients would often cough up ulcerated scabs from their throats. The illness lasted about 2 weeks, and modern estimates place the fatality rate for those infected as high as 25%. The societal impact was cataclysmic. In the city of Rome, the historian Cassius Dio reported 2,000 deaths per day at the plague's peak. The logistical challenge of disposing of the dead became so overwhelming that the city had to resort to mass graves. The plague tore through the military with devastating effect. The closely quartered legions were ravaged. On the Danube frontier, where Marcus Aurelius was fighting Germanic tribes, entire garrisons were nearly annihilated. This critical loss of manpower directly compromised the empire's ability to defend its borders. The economic system began to seize. Archaeological evidence from Egypt shows a collapse in agriculture as the rural labor force died off. Critical mining operations, like those in Dacia, ground to a halt. The cascade of failures led to severe food shortages, a halt in the production of goods, and a breakdown in trade. Commercial traffic with the Indian Ocean, for instance, appears to have stopped entirely. Public functions failed. New construction projects dropped by half. Town councils were unable to meet as officials died or fled. State revenues plummeted. Facing a fiscal collapse, Marcus Aurelius was forced to auction off the imperial family's own treasures in the Forum of Trajan to fund what was left of the military and the state. The interconnected Roman system was failing. The roads grew quiet. The ports stood idle. The cities were choked with the dead. The plague had exposed a fundamental vulnerability. The empire's arteries of conquest and commerce had become vectors of its own destruction, and the entire system was bleeding out. The Antonine Plague finally receded around 180 AD after a devastating 15-year run. It left the Roman Empire structurally broken. The total death toll is estimated at 5 to 10 million people, representing perhaps 10% of the empire's population. In the dense urban centers and military camps, the mortality rate may have been as high as 1/3. The Golden Age was over. The system had entered a new era of chronic instability. The most critical consequence was a severe and lasting military manpower crisis. With legions hollowed out, Marcus Aurelius resorted to conscripting slaves, gladiators, and Germanic tribesmen to defend the frontiers. This move permanently altered the composition of the Roman army, eroding its traditional discipline and cohesion. Rome's enemies were quick to exploit this weakness. In 167 AD, Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine, an incursion on a scale not seen for over 2 centuries. The grueling Marcomannic Wars on the Danube would consume the last years of Marcus Aurelius's reign as he fought to hold the frontiers with his depleted armies. The economic damage was permanent. The demographic shock created chronic labor shortages, leading to falling agricultural output and a shattered tax base. To meet expenses, successive emperors began debasing the currency, deliberately reducing its silver content. This triggered runaway inflation that would destabilize the Roman economy for a century to come. The era of large-scale infrastructure investment was over. The empire shifted from a mode of expansion to one of desperate maintenance. This convergence of military, demographic, and economic stress created extreme political instability. The death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 AD, possibly from the plague himself, ended the stable succession of the 5 good emperors. The decades that followed were defined by civil war and a rapid turnover of short-lived barracks emperors installed by their armies. This period is now known as the crisis of the 3rd century, a time when the Roman Empire nearly disintegrated completely. Many historians identify the Antonine Plague as the primary catalyst for this crisis. It was the initial shock from which the system never fully recovered. The population did not return to its pre-plague levels. The system's architecture, once a symbol of Roman strength, had proven to be the mechanism of a catastrophic failure. The plague's long shadow hangs over the subsequent centuries, marking the beginning of the irreversible decline of the Western Roman Empire. The Antonine Plague serves as a clinical case study in systemic failure. The Roman Empire engineered the most advanced network of its time, a system of roads and sea lanes that was the primary instrument of its power and economic life. When exposed to a biological agent, that very same network became the mechanism of its ruin. The analysis is stark. Logistical efficiency became pathological efficiency. The arteries that supplied armies also moved the contagion. The dense urban nodes that drove the economy became epicenters of mass death. The plague did not cause an immediate collapse. Instead, it inflicted a deep structural wound that never healed. It triggered a cascade of systemic crises, demographic, military, economic, and political, that brought the Pax Romana to an end and initiated a long, slow decline. The core lesson is a timeless one. The complexity and connectivity that give a system its strength can also be the source of its most profound fragilities. The balance between progress and peril is a permanent condition. The story of Rome is a timeless warning. For more on how history's great systems succeeded and failed, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below.